I didn't believe in supernatural things before this. Not ghosts, not spirits, not curses passed down through bloodlines or forgotten places. I was a biology major, grounded in the empirical cell structures, migration patterns, seasonal cycles. I trusted what I could measure, replicate, dissect. But what happened in the winter of 2022 changed all that. And I think I'm not the only one it changed. If you're reading this, I need you to understand this isn't a story. It's a warning about a lake that shouldn't exist, about something glowing beneath it, and the silence that follows anyone who stares too long into the ice. I was staying in the remote village of Kieskali, northern Finland, population 86 at the time. I was there for research, tracking migratory patterns of Arctic foxes for my graduate thesis. The funding was tight, so I found a cheap cabin through a local university contact. It was a bare-bones rental, a stove that groaned in the cold, spotty electricity, no running water unless you melted snow or chopped through the nearby lake. That lake, Revanchelajarvi, they called it. It means Northern Lights Lake, but no one in the village ever went near it. I thought it was superstition at first, an old Sami myth about trapped souls under the surface, or stories of people who drowned and were never recovered. But the villagers never gave me a straight answer. They just go quiet when I asked about it. They avoided eye contact. A few muttered Pala Allah, which roughly translates to "it burns below." It made no sense. The lake was always frozen solid, even in late spring when everything else melted. The first night I arrived at the cabin, I unpacked my gear, set up my solar charged cameras, and logged the local fox tracks I'd already seen on the drive-in. At around 11 p.m., I was inside reading by lamplight when the temperature suddenly dropped sharply. The cabin walls creaked like something pressed against them from outside. I checked the thermometer. It had plunged from -6 degrees Celsius to -22 degrees Celsius in under 10 minutes. I'd lived through Arctic storms before, but this wasn't that. There was no wind, no sound at all. Just a still, unnatural cold that seemed to press inward, like the world was shrinking. Then the light bulb dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed slowly, steadily, like something was draining the energy from inside the walls. And that's when I noticed it. Out the back window, through the trees, a faint greenish-blue glow, coming from beneath the surface of Revanchelajarvi. At first, I thought it was a trick of the northern lights' reflections on the ice. But it wasn't moving like auroras do. It pulsed, rhythmic, alive. I made my way out with a flashlight and recorder around 1 a.m., my boots crunching across snow-crusted pine needles as I headed toward the lake. I expected to find nothing, maybe moonlight refracting off a crack in the ice, or natural bioluminescence caused by trapped algae or plankton. But the lake, it wasn't like any lake I'd ever seen. There was no snow on its surface. None, despite the fact that snow covered everything else in thick drifts. The lake's surface was smooth, black, and clean, as if something beneath it had melted away anything that landed. And there, about 20 meters out from the shore, was the glow. Subtle, unnerving, almost the color of old antifreeze, tinged with flickers of red, like veins beneath translucent skin. I stepped onto the ice cautiously. It didn't creak or shift, just held firm like polished obsidian. But the further I walked, the more wrong everything felt. The wind died. My breath felt heavier. The glow intensified the closer I came. And then I heard it, a muffled sound from beneath the ice. Not water, Not shifting plates. Voices. Low. Whispers just on the edge of comprehension. Like they were calling through miles of depth. And they were saying, my name. I told the villagers the next day. About the glow. About the voices. Their reaction wasn't what I expected. They didn't laugh. They didn't roll their eyes. They got quiet. Then an old man, Sampo, the town's former schoolteacher, pulled me aside. He said he saw the glow once too. 1965, he whispered, the year the lake stopped melting. They sent divers. None came back, but at night, they started hearing things. Then children began disappearing. So the village made a rule. Stay away. Don't listen. Don't look. And never say your name out loud near the water. I asked why. His hands trembled. His eyes didn't meet mine. Because the lake remembers. I should have left then. I should have packed up and burned the notes and never looked back. But I didn't. Because a day later, one of my motion cameras picked up something impossible. Footprints. Bare feet. In the snow. Leading from the lake to the tree line, right behind my cabin. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the door with a fire poker in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Around 3 a.m., something moved in the woods. I heard the snow crunch, then a slow dragging sound, and then something brushed against the window pane. I spun, shining my light. Nothing was there, but on the glass. A handprint, small, delicate, but with 6 fingers. And just beneath the palm smear, scrawled in frost, you heard us. That was the night I stopped denying something was terribly, inhumanly wrong. Because from that moment on, the lake wasn't just glowing. It was watching. And the whispers? They started following me. Even when I was awake. Even when I was hundreds of meters away from the shoreline. I recorded the sounds. I documented the lights. I tried to send files to the university, but every time I tried to upload anything, my computer would freeze. My drives would corrupt, or the audio would be replaced with static. Except for one instance. One file made it through. It was a 13-second clip I'd captured from under the cabin's floorboards. I didn't remember placing a recorder there. The file was titled Echoes of Self.wave. I played it once. And in the background, over the low ambient hum, I heard myself say, don't dig. Don't wake it. It wears our names now. I never said those words. There are things I need to explain, things I barely understand myself. You might think you'd be safe if you never went near that lake. If you never heard the whispers. But I learned something in the days that followed. Once you hear it, it knows you. You carry it with you. And worse, it starts using you. After I heard my own voice on that strange recording, saying words I'd never said, I tore the place apart. I unscrewed panels, pulled up floorboards, smashed the outdated radio I'd brought for weather updates. I was convinced the place was bugged. That someone was playing a prank, that maybe the villagers were trying to scare me off. But I found no bugs, no microphones, no reason for that audio to exist. And then things escalated. The next night, I woke to the front door wide open. Snow blew across the floor in perfect lines, like it had been deliberately swept in. There were tracks, too. Small, human. Bare feet again. Only this time, they led back into the cabin. I followed them to the kitchen. They stopped in front of the sink, and on the fogged glass of the kitchen window, written with a finger, "You don't belong here." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep at all anymore. 2 days later, I went back to the village. I needed answers. Anything. I found Sampo sitting outside the post office, hunched over like a scarecrow, slumped in the cold. He didn't look surprised when I approached. You went out again, didn't you? He said without looking up. I nodded. You saw it. Heard it. Again, I nodded. He sighed. And then, in the kind of whisper people save for deathbeds in churches, he told me the real story. In 1965, he began 3 children disappeared. Brothers. Twins and a cousin. They were seen last near the lake, trying to skate across. They never came back. The villagers assumed they drowned, even though the ice had been solid. A few days later, strange things started happening. People heard voices in the woods. Others saw lights beneath the lake at night. Dogs refused to go near the water. They held a village meeting. One man, a Sami elder named Arrow, insisted it wasn't the children they saw or heard. It was what took them, Sampo said. When I asked what that meant, he looked at me with the emptiest eyes I've ever seen. Something lives beneath Revanchula Jarvi. Something old. Something that learns by taking. They brought in divers. For in total, none came back. The lake refused to give up their bodies. And after that, the whispers started using names. Real names. It began calling villagers by them, usually at night. People would hear their mother's voice, or their own voice, or even the voice of their child, calling from the ice. Once it says your name, Sampo said, it has a part of you. It becomes easier to get in, to get through. Through what? I asked. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, he said something I'll never forget. Through you. After speaking to Sampo, I returned to the cabin with one plan in mind. I'd document everything and leave. My project was over. Fox migration meant nothing now. I wanted out. I wanted to survive. I began recording video logs, photographing the lake, keeping journals. But something changed that night. I looked into the bathroom mirror and saw a reflection I didn't recognize. It looked like me. It moved when I moved. But its eyes weren't mine. They were darker, wet, like something lurking beneath the surface. And its mouth moved when I wasn't speaking. No sound came out. Just a shape. Just lips saying, my name. I smashed the mirror with a wrench and ran outside. The lake was glowing again, and this time it pulsed brighter, like it was aware of me, like it knew I had finally seen it. Things decayed rapidly. Electronics malfunctioned constantly. Batteries drained in minutes. Files corrupted. Pages in my journal rewrote themselves. I'm not kidding. I'd write a page, close it, and open it later to find different handwriting, different words, sometimes sketches of places I'd never seen. One night, I found a single sheet pinned to my cabin door. It was a map of the lake, hand-drawn, in ink that bled like it was still wet. There was an X marked on the center, and next to it, the words underneath waits above. I still don't know what it means. Not fully, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day, I walked out onto the ice. I reached the spot marked on the map around 1 p.m. sun overhead. Visibility clear. I brought my thermal gear and an ice drill. I didn't plan to go deep, just drill a small hole. Enough to drop a light and camera in, maybe see what was down there. But the second I drilled through, something sucked the light in, like water should have poured up, but instead it was like the hole inhaled. A sharp, metallic whistling filled the air. I dropped my waterproof flashlight down the hole on a tether. It reached about 6 meters, and then stopped, not because of depth, but because something down there grabbed the cord and pulled. I didn't even have time to react before the tether yanked from my gloves, snapping 2 of my fingers backward. I fell to the ice, scrambling backward as the cord snaked into the blackness. And then the whispers rose again. Hundreds of them. from beneath the surface. Not just voices, but names. Some I recognized, some I didn't. But one of them was my mother's voice. She's been dead for 11 years. But it was her, whispering my full name over and over. And then it said, "He's almost ready." I ran back to the cabin, sealed the door, covered the windows. But I wasn't alone. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again. They circled the cabin, stopped behind the back wall, and then something pressed its face against the window. I didn't look. I couldn't. But I heard the breath, fogging up the glass, and then a long, dry scraping of fingernails down the wall. I stayed there until dawn. The glow didn't fade until the sun came up, and I haven't seen the stars since. The next day, I found a letter in the snow outside my door. It was sealed in wax. No stamp. Inside, on crumbling old parchment, a single line. "It wakes when we forget the names of the drowned." That's when I started to wonder if the lake's glow isn't just a sign of presence. Maybe it's a memory. Maybe the lake remembers everyone it's taken. And maybe, when we forget them, it starts reaching for more, to fill the silence. I'm leaving soon, but I think it's too late for me, because the last few nights, I've started to talk in my sleep. I recorded myself, and what I said wasn't my voice. It was a woman's, and she said, "We're almost through. They say there are 3 stages to freezing to death: shivering, confusion, and then a calm warmth, like sleep pulling you under. But that's not what it feels like when something inside you is freezing instead. When something ancient and cold is clawing its way up from the lake, not to kill you, but to become you." I don't know how else to explain what started happening after that second week at Revanche-Lajardy. The whispers weren't just outside anymore. They had moved in. I began losing time. First it was minutes. I'd wake up on the cabin floor with a bleeding nose and no memory of how I got there. Then it was hours. One morning, I found myself on the far shore of the lake, barefoot, shivering, holding an object I'd never seen before. A crude, whittled figurine of a humanoid shape with no face. Just a hollow mouth and a carved line around the throat. There were symbols carved into its chest. Sami symbols, I think, but twisted. Wrong. When I brought it back to the cabin to study it, the object melted. Literally, like it was made of ice beneath the bark. I watched it dissolve on my desk, leaving only a puddle of water that steamed despite the freezing temperature. Then I found a message scrawled into the condensation on my laptop screen. "Speak me." That night, I was visited, not by the whispering voices, not by footsteps, by a person, or at least something pretending to be one. She came just after sunset. I didn't hear the door open. She was just there, sitting on the cabin floor beside the stove, legs crossed like she'd been waiting for me. She wore a soaked dress. Her skin was translucent. I could see veins, black ones, webbing across her shoulders. But her face, God, it was mine. Not a mask, not a look-alike. It was my exact face down to the scar under my lip. But wrong. Too smooth. Too symmetrical. Eyes the color of boiled snow melt, gray and unreadable. "Why do you fight it?" she asked. I couldn't speak. "It needs a name," she whispered. "You heard it. You know it now. Say it." Then she vanished. Literally, just gone, like a cut in the film reel. The only sign she'd been there was a handprint on the window. From inside, Sampo warned me never to say its name. That's what the elders used to say. Names give it form. Give it permission. But the problem was, I didn't remember hearing a name. Not exactly. That changed 3 nights later. I was reviewing audio recordings again, just old ones from my field notes. I didn't expect to find anything. But at 3:14 a.m. on a clip labeled Lake Perimeter Log 7, there was a distortion. A voice. Not mine. It said one word. 3 syllables. Something. Harsh. Like broken ice and drowning breath. I can't write it here. I won't. But I recognized it. And worse, I felt my mouth moving in time with the voice. Like I was remembering a language I'd never known. I replayed it 5 times before deleting the file. But it was too late. That night, I said it in my sleep. And the whispers got louder. I woke the next day with frostbite lines on my chest. 4 of them. Thin. Perfectly parallel. Like the imprint of skeletal fingers had reached through me. When I took off my shirt to inspect, I noticed something else. Bruises around my shoulders. Circular. Like suction marks. But not from an octopus or leech. They looked human-sized. Like lips had latched on. I vomited into the sink. Inside the bile was a small, translucent pebble. Like a fish's eye. I didn't eat that. I hadn't eaten anything except ration pack for days. And still my weight was dropping. I could see my ribs now, even though I'd done nothing to burn calories. It was feeding on me. Or worse, using me as a mouthpiece. I found it by accident. A structure deeper in the woods, hidden by snow and rotted branches. It was almost identical to mine, same dimensions, same old finish logs. But it was burned, blackened like it had been struck by lightning. Inside were remnants of someone else's stay. Cracked notebooks, moldy clothes, photographs faded almost white. And one intact Polaroid. A man standing on the lake. But not on the ice. On water. It was glass calm. No ripples, as if he stood on a mirror. His mouth was open, screaming, but the photo had been scratched out around his eyes, deeply, over and over, and on the back, he spoke it. He opened the surface. Late one night, I was staring out at the lake through binoculars. It was frozen solid, but the glow beneath had changed. No longer greenish or blue. Now it pulsed red, like a wound struggling to clot. And then I heard a crack. Not ice breaking. A bone. It came from behind me. I turned, and there, standing in the corner, was the figure again. My face. Her dress. Only this time, her mouth was open all the way down to her chest, like a split throat grinning vertically. She didn't speak. She just reached up and pointed to the ceiling. I looked. Carved into the beams above me was a word. The name. The one I swore I wouldn't say. It was written in my handwriting. And still dripping. I left the cabin the next morning. Hiked toward the village, gear on my back. But the forest had changed. The trees were too tall. Too close. No paths. No trails. The GPS spun in circles. Birdsong had stopped. No tracks in the snow. Not even mine after a few steps. Like the land didn't want me to leave. I walked for hours. And when I finally emerged onto a clearing, I saw it. My cabin. The same one. But I knew I hadn't walked in a circle. I'd gone due west. It was like the place had moved to intercept me. That night, I saw things beneath the ice. Not just light. Faces. Pressed against the underside of the frozen lake. Thousands of them. All mouthing something. Some I recognized from old village photos. One was me, and its eyes moved when mine did. I write this now with hands that don't feel like mine. I don't sleep anymore. The walls whisper constantly. The snow doesn't melt around me anymore. It avoids me. Like I've gone cold inside. I know I've spoken the name. And I think I know what happens next. Because I found a note in my own handwriting I don't remember writing. It says, "It doesn't take you. It replaces you. To whoever finds this, don't speak to the lake. Don't listen when it says your name. Don't follow the glow. And if you see someone who looks like you, run." The reflection that watches back, recovered from the private audio journals of Dr. Elias Miran, transcribed 02/24/22, Lake Revanchula, Finland. Warning. Content have been deemed psychologically hazardous by forensic reviewers. Proceed with caution. There's something about northern light in February, how it spills sideways through the trees like it's reluctant to stay. That's how everything feels now. Hesitant, pulling away. The sun barely rises anymore. When it does, it smears across the frozen lake like blood under ice. And the glow beneath that surface has changed again. It pulses now, like a heartbeat. It never pulses in rhythm with mine, but it knows my rhythm, and it's learning to match it. I've begun to catch my reflection moving out of sync. First in the cabin window, then in the basin water, then in the black of the unplugged laptop screen. My reflection doesn't mimic me anymore. It waits, a second too long, watching before it moves, like it's studying, practicing. And then 2 nights ago, it smiled when I didn't. My lips stayed still, but the thing in the window curled upward, showing every tooth. I couldn't breathe. My body went cold, not fear, not frostbite. Something else, like something inside me was watching too, and it was happy. I hiked to the burned cabin again. This time, the door was open, and inside, I found dozens, hundreds of photographs nailed to the walls, all warped from heat, but not destroyed. Each one showed a different person standing on the frozen lake. Some were from decades ago, faded clothing, old snow gear, some in Sami robes, but all of them were standing in the same place, the exact center of the lake. Each one had a shadow below them in the ice. But the shadows didn't match. They had longer limbs, bent joints, eyes glowing from the ice. Every shadow had a face, the same face. Mine. I no longer sleep through the night. I don't dream anymore, but I hear, at 2:17 a.m., every night without fail, the whispers come again. Closer, clearer. One night I answered. I spoke the name. It came through me. My voice changed, deeper, fractured, like a frozen wind cutting across a hollow throat. I stood in front of the mirror and watched my eyes roll back. I wasn't in control. I watched my mouth speak words I didn't know. When I came to, the mirror was cracked, and in the frost on the glass, a phrase was etched backward, readable only in reflection. You are no longer alone. 3 days ago, I tried to leave again. This time, I made it to the ridge above the lake. That's when I saw it. At the lake's center, the ice had cracked. Not broken, but etched. A spiral had formed, black against the glass surface, stretching outward from a perfect center, almost mathematical. It looked burnt-in, ancient. As I watched, the center point began to glow. Then the glow moved, not down, but up, as if something was climbing toward the surface from far, far below. It was rhythmic, too steady for water, too intentional for a natural phenomenon. And then I heard it again, my name, not shouted, not whispered, exhaled, from under the ice. That night, I found my journal pages torn out and rewritten in a hand just like mine, but cleaner, neater. The new pages were written from a different perspective. They said things like, Elias is nearly ready. He hears clearly now. The surface must break soon. The mouth must open. And finally, when he breaks, I take root. I didn't write those words, but I understood them, because the next morning, I found myself asleep in the snow beside the lake, fully dressed, face down, no footprints leading to or from where I lay. And when I looked into the ice, just beneath the surface, I saw two of me, one staring up, the other smiling. I've stopped referring to it by name. I understand now why Sampo warned me, why the villagers wouldn't speak. Names are permissions. When you say it, you invite it. And when it hears you, it mimics, echoes, until you forget the sound of your own voice. And when that happens, you become an echo, a reflection it can wear. I'm starting to forget how I sound, how I feel. Sometimes I swear I can feel it inside my ribs rearranging, like I'm being hollowed, reconstructed, not all at once, but slowly, like a nest being built in my chest. I return to the lake's edge at night, camera in hand. The spiral is now enormous, covering at least 50 meters of perfect black etching burned into the ice. It moves subtly when you stare too long, like your eyes can't hold its full shape. But worse than that, there are others. Shapes in the trees. People? Shadows? No, not people. They move like insects pretending to be human. Stiff. Deliberate. Some are wearing faces. I recognized one. The girl from the lake, the one with my face. Her skin is now cracked, her eyes completely hollow. She watches from a distance. Sometimes I hear her whisper the name again. Sometimes I see her reflection before I see her body. There's not much time left. I feel the change coming like a cold front in my lungs. I know it's waiting beneath the ice. It's been here long before this lake froze, before there was language to describe it. Something old, something plural, and it's hungry not for flesh, but form. It wants to wear us, to speak through us, to be us so we never know the difference. It starts with a name, then a reflection, then a voice, and then you're gone. I leave this final message scratched into the wall of the cabin. The ice is not solid. The lake is not asleep. The face in the water is not yours anymore. Final recovered transcript. Sampo Vano S. Field audio recorder device found partially submerged on the northern shoreline of Lake Revanchelajarvi, March 3rd, 2022. Note: recording ends abruptly. Artifacts in the audio waveform remain unexplained. Proceed with extreme caution. When I returned to the lake, Elias was already gone. Not gone in the way people disappear to escape. Gone as if he had been absorbed. His cabin was open. The heat was off. Food half-eaten. The fire burned to blackened ash. But no signs of struggle. Only a smear of wet footprints leading out to the frozen lake. Bare feet, human-looking, but long, toes too long, and a single line carved into the door frame. I remember how it feels to be inside you. His camera lay on the table. I opened the last video. It was of him, sitting still, breathing shallowly, whispering the same name over and over in a voice that wasn't his. The video ends when his reflection walks away without him. At first, I thought the stories were just old Sami folklore, cautionary tales of spirits and drowned gods beneath the ice. But I saw it myself. On the night of February 28th, the spiral cracked wide. I was on the ridge above, watching with binoculars. The ice didn't break from above, but from underneath, like something had swum up, huge, deliberate, and begun to push outward. The light wasn't natural. It didn't shine, it leaked, like color from an open wound. The spiral pulsed, and as it did, reflections began to form around the lake's edge. But there was nothing to cast them, just shapes walking, echoes of people, and they all moved toward the center. I couldn't run. Not when I heard them. Hundreds of voices, all speaking in unison, but slightly out of sync, like a choir collapsing in on itself. They weren't words. Not at first. Then one phrase emerged, rising above the rest like a blade pulled from a throat. It wears us. The sound didn't come from above or around, but from within, like it was inside my skull, vibrating behind my eyes. My nose bled. My fingers twitched. My own mouth began to echo the words, syllables I didn't recognize but somehow understood. And just before I passed out, I saw something climb out of the spiral. It was wearing a face I knew. Mine. I woke up underground. Not in dirt. In ice. Translucent blue curved above me like a rib cage. The lake had opened like a mouth, and I had been swallowed. I couldn't move at first. My arms were pinned in frost, but I could see shapes encased in the walls. People, their eyes open, lips moving, breathing water. Still alive, but just barely. Each one had a duplicate across from him. Reflections with no pupils. Just static eyes, mouths grinning, feeding off them. I realized these were the ones taken, and their copies had replaced them up above. That's when I saw Elias, floating above the others. Limbs wrong, too long, joints backwards, but his face still his, mostly. He drifted toward me like seaweed in black water, head cocked, as if he were studying me. And then he spoke, though his lips didn't move. It took me in pieces. I screamed in every language I knew. But now I am the lake. He reached out and touched my forehead, and I saw everything. Not all lakes are natural. Some are wounds in the world, and some wounds never heal. They fester and birth things. The spiral is older than language, older than ice. It was never meant to be opened, but something below has been gnawing at the seal for centuries. It doesn't devour flesh. It devours identity. It uses the mirror as a gate, your voice as a key, and your name as an invitation. Elias tried to study it. I tried to warn others. But the thing beneath has already replaced dozens, maybe hundreds. Reflections walk among us. Some of them no longer even blink. I broke free. Not sure how. Maybe the lake let me go. Maybe it thought I was already hollow enough. I crawled across the ice, lungs burning, blood frozen. The last thing I saw in the water was myself, staring up, waving goodbye. But not to me, to something behind me. I didn't look. I made it to the shore. I ran without direction for what felt like hours. I woke in a hunter's shed, babbling, broken. They found my recorder clutched in my hand. Everything I'd said, everything I'd seen. They say I talk in my sleep now, that I whisper names that aren't mine, in voices that don't match. The lake has frozen over again. The spiral is gone, but I know it's still there, waiting. And sometimes when I pass a mirror, the reflection doesn't move right. Sometimes it smiles first. And last week, I swear this is true, my own footprint appeared beside my bed while I slept. And the whisper came again, right behind my ear. I remember how it feels to be inside you. I don't know if I escaped, or if I'm just the first test copy. But if you ever go to Revanchula Jarvi, and you see something glowing beneath the ice, don't look down. Don't answer when it calls your name, because once it knows your name, it wears your skin forever.